history. So I think of this book as the positive counterpart to it. It's very much about how we can manage to care for and project our energy outwards. And I've always been really interested in psychology and personal development. And I have also read my fair share of self-help over the years. I'm an extreme introvert, and I often feel socially quite awkward. I have a lot of inner noise going on, very harsh, unkind superego. And I've somehow always been looking for cures for these conditions. And I also grew up with a really strong internalized belief that we can and always must improve ourselves. So, internalized this fairly Protestant work ethic extended to the self. And so I read a lot of self-help, but because I'm a cultural historian and a literature scholar by training, at some point read these texts much more critically. And I realized that most of our self-help is really very ideological in spirit. It's not just harmless advice literature. And it's also a hugely influential genre if we think about it. It very powerfully and directly seeks to shape our aspirations and our values and behaviors. And it really does so at scale. So self-help is a massive industry, worth almost $40 billion worldwide. And I think at the same time, this imperative that we constantly have to improve ourselves, that we have to work on ourselves, is a really, really strong cultural expectation in our times. And many of us have internalized it quite unquestioningly, and including myself. And at some point I wondered, where did it come from? And has it always been like this? And if we drill down deeper, what does self-improvement actually mean? So what is our current understanding of the self? What counts as improvement and why? So, for example, why should it be considered an improvement to become more extroverted, when we might be naturally quite introverted? And these were the kinds of questions that motivated me to write my book. And of course, as a cultural historian, I'm also really interested in what changes and what remains the same, and especially when it comes to self-improvement advice. And I discovered that self-improvement has a hugely long history, and that there's really a lot that we can learn from our ancestors and from other cultures.
So when you started researching, going back in the history of self-improvement, how far does this idea of self-improvement go? And do we see it across cultures?
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing, Brett. It goes back all the way to ancient China, to the earliest recorded texts that people have written. And I do think that self-improvement really is a ubiquitous and timeless desire, and that it can be traced all the way back to the ancient civilizations. And really, it is for millennia that philosophers, sages, and theologians have reflected on the good life and devised strategies on how to achieve it. So I really do see self-improvement as a timeless human desire. And I see it very intricately related to learning and to self-knowledge and to growth. And of course, there are quite a lot of academics who critique self-help, and they see this constant imperative to self-optimize as a perfidious neoliberal creature which is designed to put all responsibility for our well-being on our own shoulders. And they argue that self-help distracts us from the structural forces that may be making us ill. But I really do think that whilst there is self-help of that kind out there, the imperative and the desire to self-improve is really a huge part of what makes us human. And it has been a feature of human experience from the very start. And I do think that self-help is actually a specific genre that emerged in the 19th century, when the first self-help text as we know it, written for autodidacts who want to improve themselves without the help of others, want a kind of how-to manual, and that doesn't require the involvement of any other third parties. So that's a fairly new genre, but ancient advice literature that is aimed at helping us to improve, to grow, to learn, to sharpen our self-understanding and self-knowledge really can be found in ancient China, in ancient Greece, and it has a really long tradition. And I think that tradition is hugely interesting to explore, because many of the modern self-help texts actually hark back into these ancient practices, and they repackage, rebrand, relabel older ideas. And it's really interesting to trace these back to their original sources.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make in the book, is that today self-help or self-improvement literature is written by self-help authors. And these people are typically maybe sometimes psychologists, other times they're just people who decide, I was successful, here's what worked for me.
Demons, be gone!
Be gone, demons.
Be gone!
Leave this studio!